My name is David Findlay. I was born in 1959, and that means I'm 55 years old. I am a musician, a composer, and audio engineer, and I teach here at the Center for Arts and Technology. Closest person to me in my childhood would be my father. It's hard to pick my father, my mother, or my friends, but it would be my father, and I guess the reason would be is that I have an older sister, and so it was pretty much split along gender lines. It was my sister and my mom and my dad and me, and that's, I guess, how it ended up working. He was, even though he was busy and he ran his own business, he always had time for me, which is something that not a lot of people can say. I always look back at those times as my father was the one who laced up my skates, took me to this, took me to that, and also as I became an adolescent, we played golf together. My father was a golfer, and I did a lot of competitive golf, and he was always driving me to the golf course, buying my clubs and golf balls and hamburgers and whatever else came with it, because I pretty much lived at the golf course as a young teen. And he paid for it all. Also encouraged me, made sure that I would call him up. He'd drop me off at the golf course in the morning, and I'd play all day, and then he'd pick me up on the way back from work afterwards. And if I had to go to a tournament, he'd drive me there, drive me back. We talk about golf, we talk about life, we talk about this. And even though he was a product of his generation, because he was born in the early 20s, 1921, and it was a Second War vet and that type of thing, and from Scotland. So people from that part of the world in that time were not big on talking about deep things. You didn't talk about your feelings, but you still got them across. And that would be why my father would have been the closest person to me in my childhood. When I was a young kid, I was big into hockey, and of course, my favorite hockey team is the Montreal Canadiens. It still is. And Gump Worsley was the goalie for Montreal because he was short and he was known for being a particularly good goalie. Won a lot of Stanley Cups for Montreal. So Gump, maybe he had a strange name and he had a brush cut. It was very strange, kind of prickly character. But I always thought he was great. And I thought if I wanted to be a goalie, I want to be just like Gump. I want to have the same pads. I want to be number 30, just like Gump. So that would have been that. And as I got later on, probably be more like John Lennon. So things would change. I would go from Gump Worsley to John Lennon as being sort of a hero type, because he was acerbic, he was outspoken. I always thought he was terribly cool. And of course, being a Beatle fan, if you don't like John Lennon, well, you got a problem. So, but yes, those would be heroes of mine growing up. Well, like all little kids, you go through phases. You start by thinking you're going to be an airline pilot, or you're going to be a soldier or a hockey player. Everybody wants to be a hockey player in this country. I got that knocked out of me pretty early. Or a professional golfer was going to be that too. But as far as being a musician, I've always been in music. There's a picture of me when I don't think I was much more than one, and I have a little ukulele, and I was even playing it wrong-handed. I used to run around with a guitar constantly. I used to play the record player. Those are the black things that go round and round with the needle. And I would have the record player on constantly. And even at the age of 1 or 2, I could find pretty much whatever cut I wanted. There's one tune I used to play endlessly, apparently. My mother told me this story. I would have been about 1. And I was sitting on the kitchen table with the record player, and it was playing Kenneth McKellar's Scotland the Brave. And it was the second to last cut, so I would always pull it back and start it again. So Scotland the Brave was played constantly, by me. And apparently the washing machine blew up one day, so there's water all over the place, belching out all over the house. And there's 1-year-old Dave sitting there with Scotland the Brave at ear-splitting volumes. So yeah, the music there's always been music in our home. We always had audio, a good stereo console. It was the 60s, and we listened to everything. My sister was musical. She's 7 years older than I, so she sang. I wanted to be a Beatle in the worst way. I was, I guess, 5 or 6 when the Beatles hit North America, so I wanted to be a Beatle, and I wanted to play the guitar. But I had little teeny weeny hands, and then at that time there were no small scale guitars. I was just told, you have to wait until you're older. Of course, when you're 5 or 6 and you're told you have to wait till you're 10, it's like waiting a million years. But anyway, I won the consolation prize, and I got piano lessons starting when I was 6. And like every kid at that time, got piano lessons. And I took to them quite well and got, I guess, good at it and just didn't stop. getting good at anything is just not quitting, I suppose. Not being smart enough to saying, I'm going to give this up. I didn't give it up. And I went further and further, and so that's how I ended up in music. I got music degrees. I played in bands, I played in orchestras, and I got into audio because I'm a bit of a geek about audio. I was fascinated by the way things interconnected. I'm kind of like the man with two brains. I can be technical on one side and artistic on the other, and it's to be a recording engineer and a music producer, you kind of have to be like that. I can wire a recording studio and then I can record somebody and play the parts. That's a skill that I think is kind of important to be able to do that. And if you have those kinds of interests, they're complementary. So I've always been involved in music. I taught music at high school level, college level. Now I'm here teaching audio and music, and it's a confluence of everything I've done, including I've been scoring film and video for the last 15, 16 years now, I guess. And I've scored a lot of movies. So again, that's musical skill, that's technical skill, and some of my composer friends said I was fortunate in that I could do all my own engineering and sound work. They usually have to hire an engineer. I didn't have to do that, and so I've been pretty blessed to be able to do that and stay in it. And not too many people I know of have been able to make a living doing it and keep doing it, because when things get difficult, you tend to quit. But I just couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. I was born and raised in Montreal. I've lived all over the country. I've lived in 5 provinces. I lived in Montreal pretty much until 1999, although I had a stint in the UK, but I lived in Edmonton, the coldest place on earth for a winter, in 1984, 85. Moved back to Montreal, and then I lived there till 1999. Then I moved to Vancouver for 2 years, and my wife at the time got transferred to Toronto, so we lived in Toronto for 5 years. Then we moved back to Vancouver, and then I got divorced, and I moved back to Toronto, and then 3 years ago, almost to the day, we moved to Nova Scotia. So that's where we are here now. We used to play our hockey outdoors, even when it was cold. You look forward to the snow, and you look forward to the ice so that you could go out and skate. Kids had skating rinks in their backyards. That's like the Wayne Gretzky story, because Gretzky's 2 years younger than I am. So playing outside, and I was no Wayne Gretzky, believe me. I was an okay hockey player, but I played hockey for years, like every other kid. And that was the stuff that was kind of magic. There was something, a memory. You asked what's a memory. Going out, coming home from school, there was a hockey rink across the street. I lived on a cul-de-sac in the suburbs of Montreal, and put on my skates at 3:30, whatever it was, and skated till 5:30, till my mother called me in. It was dark and just a street light, and playing hockey myself in a net and just skating around for 2 hours. That was like incredible, really, when I think of the level of freedom that I had as a kid. That the most important thing is that's the one thing I think if I were to come back now as a little kid, I would miss. We would go out in the morning, we'd come back maybe for lunch, go back out again on our bikes. We had freedom, nobody worried about us. You didn't wear helmets, you didn't wear seat belts. And somehow you survived, You found things, you got into fights, you beat people up, you got beat up, you go home with a fat lip, It's the way it goes. That doesn't happen anymore. Everybody's intervening and not letting kids work out their own things. I had to work out stuff, and I think that was good, working out difficult situations, trying situations, and having to cope with things in school. We didn't always have good teachers. You had some that were great, some that were just bullies. And it was a different time, and it was, I think, a freer time, and one that was easier to grow up and find yourself in without too much control. I know I sound like I'm editorializing, and I'm sure I am, but those are the memories. It's the freedom I recall, just discovering things for myself without anybody leading me to it and telling me I couldn't, of course.